The security alarm was going crazy. 8 alien predator cubs were dragging something through the space station corridors at midnight. Not food. Not toys. They were carrying their most precious possessions, ancestral bedding worth more than entire starships. The security chief couldn't believe his eyes. These cubs were from a species that killed to protect their bedding. It was sacred, passed down for generations. But they were dragging it toward the human maintenance workers' quarters. To Emma Walsh, who had been sleeping on a metal floor for 3 nights, Emma Walsh didn't know any of this was happening. She was asleep in what the station called quarters, but was really just a converted storage closet. No bed. No mattress. Not even a blanket. Just a cold metal floor and her folded work coveralls as a pillow. The station had told her there were budget constraints when she'd asked for basic bedding 3 days ago. Meanwhile, 8 Krillian cubs were doing the impossible. Each one was dragging silk bedding that had been in their families for centuries. This wasn't just expensive stuff. This was religious. Holy. The kind of thing their species went to war over. A single thread of this silk could buy a small spaceship. Security Chief Tharvan stared at his monitors in complete shock. "Commander, the cubs are carrying their nest bedding to the humans' quarters." "That's impossible," Commander Vex replied. "Krillians kill anyone who touches their bedding. Even their own siblings." But the video feeds didn't lie. 8 cubs, each about the size of a large dog, were struggling with bundles 3 times their size. They moved in perfect coordination, taking turns dragging when one got tired. Their bioreadings showed something that shouldn't exist: empathy responses in a species that didn't have empathy. The cubs reached Emma's door. What happened next would change the galaxy forever. They began arranging the bedding on her floor with the kind of care usually reserved for religious ceremonies. Each piece was placed precisely, woven together using techniques that took master weavers decades to learn. These cubs were doing it by instinct, creating the most elaborate comfort nest ever recorded. The silk they were using had properties humans couldn't even imagine. It regulated temperature perfectly. It had pheromones that induced peaceful sleep and healing. It was antibacterial, self-cleaning, and would last thousands of years. Each piece had been touched by dozens of generations of mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, adding their own comfort blessing to it. Security teams rushed to the scene, but when they arrived, something strange happened. The cubs didn't run. They didn't hide. They stood between the security team and Emma's door, making sounds no one had ever heard from their species, soft chirping noises that mother Krillians made for newborns. Except these cubs were too old to remember those sounds. They shouldn't even know how to make them. "Sir, they're not protecting the bedding," Lieutenant Kovar observed. "They're protecting their right to give it away." Inside the room, Emma shifted in her sleep. "Thanks for the blanket facilities," she mumbled, not opening her eyes. About time. She thought the station had finally provided basic bedding. She had no idea 8 alien children were sacrificing their inheritance for her. Dr. Kexera, the station's xenobiologist, arrived with every scanner she had. What she found defied millions of years of evolution. The cubs were performing something called the 7-strand bond, a ritual Krillians only did when joining their lives together forever, like marriage. They were weaving their individual family lines into one unified bed. "This is scientifically impossible," Dr. Kexera said, her voice shaking. "They're showing brain activity in regions that don't exist in their species. Parental care centers, empathy regions, communal bonding areas. None of this should be there." The cubs continued their work, their small claws moving with incredible precision. They were adapting patterns meant for Krillian bodies to fit a human shape. They added extra padding where Emma's hips and shoulders would rest. They raised the edges to keep her warm. They even created a perfect pillow from the softest silk, the kind usually reserved for newborn cubs. Then came the really shocking part. The cubs began secreting something onto the bedding: bonding enzymes. In Krillian culture, these enzymes created permanent, unbreakable ownership. Once something was marked with these enzymes, it belonged to that person forever. Not even the government could take it away. It was protected by laws older than space travel. They're not just giving her bedding, Dr. Kexera realized. They're making it legally, permanently, genetically hers. Forever. The security team tried everything to stop them. They released pheromones that should trigger fear responses. The cubs ignored them. They played recordings of adult Krillian authority calls. The cubs didn't even look up. They offered the cubs brand new, premium bedding in exchange. The cubs hissed and went back to work. Nothing could stop them from completing their gift. Then the real crisis began. Alarms started screaming across the station. Adult Krillians were coming. 8 massive predators, each one 9 feet tall with claws that could tear through steel, responding to the scent of their cubs' abandoned nests. "What is this betrayal?" he roared. His cub, the one Emma had named Spots because of his markings, looked up at his father and spoke for the first time in galactic standard. "Empty nest wrong. Emma gave names and food. We fix injustice." The adult Krillians froze. Their cubs had never spoken before. Krillian cubs didn't develop speech until adolescence. But here they were, forming words in an alien language to defend their actions. More adult Krillians arrived, each discovering their own cubs participating in this impossible gift-giving. They saw something that hadn't been created in thousands of years: the 16 bloodlines woven into one. Every major Krillian family represented in the group had contributed their ancestral silk to create a single unified bed. Wars had been fought over lesser cooperations. Emma woke up to find herself surrounded by giant alien predators and their cubs. She sat up quickly, confused and apologetic. "Oh no, what did I do? I'm so sorry for whatever mess I've made." She started trying to fold what she thought were random blankets, not realizing she was handling religious artifacts worth more than planets. "No." All 8 cubs said in unison, their second word ever. They pressed against her, preventing her from moving the bedding. "I don't understand," Emma said. "What's happening?" Pack leader Raptor looked at this small human, this maintenance worker who fixed pipes and air filters, and asked the question burning in his mind. "You have been sleeping on metal?" Emma shrugged. "It's fine. I've slept in worse places. At least it's dry and I'm indoors." "You maintain life support for 3,000 beings on this station," Raptor said slowly, "and they gave you a storage closet with no bed?" "Budget constraints," Emma said, as if that explained everything. The cubs started making a new sound, purring. Adult Krillians hadn't purred in recorded history. It was considered a myth, something from their pre-civilized era. But now the adults were starting to purr too, a deep rumbling that made the walls vibrate. Station Administrator Gexnell arrived with security forces, his 6 eyes gleaming with greed. "That bedding is worth more than this station's annual budget. It will be confiscated immediately and sold to cover operational costs." What happened next shocked everyone. The adult Krillians moved to stand with their cubs, forming a protective wall around Emma and her gift. Parents who moments ago had been furious were now defending their children's right to give away priceless treasures. "You will not touch the gift," Raptor said, his voice dangerous. "Our cubs have chosen. The bedding is hers by right of gift, by enzyme bond, and now by parental consent." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she finally understood what had happened. "They gave me their family treasures? What? Why would they do this?" The smallest cub, who Emma called Tiny, struggled to form new words. "Emma shared lunch. Said nobody should eat alone." The truth came out piece by piece. For weeks, Emma had been eating her small lunch with the cubs. The station had put their nursery area next to the maintenance break room. While other workers avoided the predator cubs, Emma had shared her sandwiches with them. She'd given them names. She talked to them about Earth, about weather, about her family. She treated them like children instead of dangerous animals. "You shared your food with them?" Administrator Gexnell said with disgust. "They're predators. They could have killed you. They're kids, Emma said simply. Kids eating alone is sad. So we ate together. Dr. Kexera's scanner started beeping frantically. Commander, you need to see this. The cubs they're producing new silk. Everyone turned to stare. From glands that should have been dormant, the cubs were creating new bedding material. This ability had been lost for millions of years. Adult Krillians couldn't produce silk. It was why their ancestral bedding was so precious. But Emma's kindness had somehow reactivated this ancient ability. We can make new bedding, Spot said excitedly, his speech already improving. When we share we can make more. Emma taught us. The implications were staggering. Krillian society was built on scarcity. They hoarded their bedding because they couldn't make more. Wars had been fought over comfort materials. But now 8 cubs had discovered that sharing somehow triggered the ability to create more. Pack leader Raptor stepped forward and did something unprecedented. He knelt before Emma, bringing his massive head down to her level. Human Emma Walsh, I speak for all Krillian bloodlines present. You are hereby named Nest Mother of the 16 lines. This is our highest honor. You are family to all Krillians now and forever. I just shared my lunch, Emma said, overwhelmed. They gave me so much more. Pack leader Raptor arrived first, fury radiating from every muscle. He expected to find thieves, criminals who had stolen his bloodline's sacred bedding. Instead, he found his cub carefully tucking silk around a sleeping human's form. No, Raptor corrected. You gave us something we had lost. You gave us the ability to give. News spread across the galaxy within hours. Emergency meetings were called on dozens of worlds. Reports flooded in of young predators across the galaxy sharing their most precious possessions with humans who had shown them kindness. The impossible was happening everywhere. The Galactic Council convened the largest assembly in over a century. Emma was brought before them, still in her stained maintenance coveralls, still trying to understand what she'd started. Explain how you did this, the council president demanded. Emma looked at the thousands of representatives from hundreds of worlds. I didn't do anything special. I shared my lunch because eating alone is sad. I gave them names because everyone deserves a name. I talked to them because they seemed lonely. That's all. The cubs demonstrated their new ability, producing silk on command. But more importantly, they showed that they chose to share it rather than keep it. Cubs from other predator species, Vorthax, Zelthrans, Korthaxes, all began working together, creating bedding for other humans who lacked proper accommodation. When we share we make more, all the cubs said together. When we hold tight we make less. The council voted unanimously to create the Walsh Protocol, mandating adequate living conditions for all station workers regardless of species or position. No one who maintained life support, who cleaned the halls, who kept civilization running, would sleep on floors while others rested in luxury. Emma was offered positions everywhere, universities, governments, corporations. She turned them all down. The cubs made me the best bed in the universe. I'm happy where I am. The transformation that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The Krillian economy, based on scarcity for millennia, revolutionized overnight. Instead of hoarding their silk, they began sharing freely. And the more they shared, the more they could produce. Within months, there was more comfort material available than ever before in their history. Other species discovered the same principle. The Vorthax found that sharing their heating stones let them create more. The Zelthrans learned that distributing their cooling gel increased their production capacity. Every act of sharing unlocked greater abundance. Scientists called it the generosity gene activation. When beings shared their most precious resources, dormant genetic sequences activated, enabling them to produce more of whatever they'd given away. Scarcity, it turned out, was often self-imposed by the fear of not having enough. 6 months later, Emma's little storage closet had become the most famous room in the galaxy. Now called the Unity Nest, beings traveled from distant worlds just to see the original bedding that changed everything. The cubs, now adolescents, served as what they called comfort ambassadors, teaching others their discovery. Emma still worked maintenance, but now with assistance from every predator species. They learned that maintaining others' comfort was just as important as maintaining machines. The station had been completely rebuilt, every worker had proper quarters, many featuring collaborative bedding designs inspired by the cubs' gift. The cubs had created a universal sign language for comfort sharing. A paw over the heart meant, I have extra. Open palms meant, I need comfort. Crossed arms over a gift meant, this is for you forever. The language spread faster than any trade language ever had. This metal floor, tour guides would say, pointing to the preserved section of Emma's original sleeping spot, reminds us that no being should suffer while others rest in comfort. One human's kindness to 8 cubs revolutionized our understanding of resources. Emma kept her simple routine. Wake up, check life support systems, share lunch with whoever was hungry, host evening gatherings where different species taught their comfort traditions. Former enemies worked side by side, creating bedding for refugees, proving that comfort sharing prevented more conflicts than any treaty. The cubs had grown but still visited daily. They'd bring new innovations, silk that could heal wounds, bedding that could calm anxiety, materials that adapted to any species' needs. Each discovery came from the same principle. When you share freely, innovation flows freely too. Your comfort increases when you increase others' comfort, they would teach. This isn't philosophy. It's biology. We literally produce more when we share more. 1 year after that first night, the anniversary celebration was held in Emma's quarters. The original bedding was still there, still used nightly. Emma had refused to let it become a museum piece. Gifts are meant to be used, not displayed. The cubs would be sad if I didn't sleep on it. The cubs, now young adults, presented her with something that represented the entire galaxy's transformation. The Unity Weave. A single thread from every species in the Alliance, woven together into a tapestry that told the story of how sharing created abundance. Pack leader Raptor announced the statistics. Crystalline silk production has increased 10,000-fold since we learned to share. We have more comfort now than we ever did when we hoarded. He paused. One human maintenance worker taught us that abundance comes from open hands, not closed fists. Emma was fixing a squeaky hinge during her own ceremony, making everyone laugh. Comfort comes from small acts, not grand gestures. The cubs didn't change the galaxy with a philosophy. They changed it by not wanting me to sleep on cold metal. They cared, so they acted. That's all heroism is, seeing a problem and caring enough to help. The cubs performed their comfort dance, passing pieces of bedding between them, never holding any piece for long, showing how letting go created flow. Warriors who had never shown emotion openly wept. Tears were no longer weakness but abundance of feeling meant to be shared. New cubs arriving at the station would immediately seek out Emma, their arms full of bedding to share. It had become instinctive. The evolutionary change was permanent. Young predators were now born with the sharing instinct active. Wars had decreased by 80%. Resource conflicts had become almost obsolete. Why fight when sharing created more? The galaxy had transformed from scarcity-based competition to abundance-based cooperation, and it had all started with 8 cubs who couldn't bear to see their friend uncomfortable. Emma continued her work for years, training generations of maintenance workers who understood they maintained not just machines but the comfort of all beings. She stayed in the same quarters, on the same bedding the cubs had given her. New layers were added each year as more species contributed their traditions, but the original weave remained at the core. You fixed more than pipes, the cubs would tell her when they visited with cubs of their own. You fixed how we see the universe. You kids did that yourselves, Emma would always reply. You saw someone uncomfortable and did something about it. That's all any of us can do, see a problem and care enough to help. The Crystalline species had transformed completely. From solitary predators hoarding their comfort, they'd become the galaxy's primary comfort providers. Their silk was freely given to any who needed it. Their economy boomed not despite the sharing but because of it. The story spread to every corner of known space. When young ones asked why they shared, their parents would tell them about Emma and the cubs. About the night when everything changed. About the maintenance worker who slept on metal until love itself carried comfort to her door. Years passed. Emma grew old, but the cubs, now elders themselves, never forgot. When she passed peacefully in her sleep on that same treasured bedding, they maintained the unity nest not as a shrine to her but to the principle she'd unknowingly taught. Comfort shared is comfort multiplied. New species joining the alliance would be brought there first. They'd be shown the metal floor and the magnificent bed. They'd hear how 8 cubs loved a human so much they gave her everything, only to discover that giving everything somehow created more of everything. This is why we share, they would be told. Not because we have excess but because sharing creates excess. A human named Emma and 8 cubs proved that the universe has enough for everyone, we just have to be willing to pass it around. The bedding still exists today, carefully maintained, still used by whatever maintenance worker tends that section. It's been repaired thousands of times, each repair adding new threads from new species, but the core remains 8 cubs' ancestral silk, woven with love for a tired human who shared her lunch. Every child in the galaxy learns this story. They learn that revolution doesn't require weapons or force. Sometimes it just requires seeing someone who needs help and caring enough to act. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness, sharing a sandwich, giving someone a name, talking to them when they're lonely, can transform entire civilizations. Emma Walsh never intended to change the galaxy. She just couldn't stand eating alone and couldn't bear sleeping on cold metal one more night. But 8 cubs loved her enough to give her everything they had. And in that giving, they discovered the secret of infinite abundance. When you share from love, the universe ensures you always have more to share. The Unity Nest stands as proof that comfort isn't a luxury, it's a right. That sharing isn't sacrifice, it's multiplication. That kindness isn't weakness, it's the force that revolutionizes worlds. In her last log entry found after she passed, Emma wrote, "Came to space to fix machines. Ended up learning the universe isn't a machine at all. It's a home. And in a home everyone gets a bed. Thanks, kids, for teaching me that. Thanks for the best bed in the universe. Thanks for showing everyone that sharing doesn't divide, it multiplies by love." The revolution continues every day. Every time someone shares their comfort, every time someone sees another's need and acts, every time someone chooses abundance over scarcity. The cub's discovery has become natural law. Sharing creates more. Thousands of years have passed since that night when 8 cubs dragged their ancestral bedding through station corridors to give a tired human a place to sleep. The story has become legend, myth, scripture. But the truth remains simple. They saw someone they loved sleeping on metal and they couldn't bear it. So they gave her everything. And everything, it turned out, was just the beginning. Because when you give from love, when you share from care, when you can't bear to see another suffer, you don't just change their world. You change the entire universe. You prove that there's enough for everyone. You show that comfort shared is comfort multiplied. You demonstrate that the smallest acts of kindness can rewrite the laws of reality itself. Emma and the cubs proved that. They proved it with sandwiches and silk, with names and nests, with the simple truth that nobody should sleep on metal when others rest in comfort. They proved that love doesn't recognize species, that kindness doesn't calculate worth, that comfort belongs to everyone. And they proved one more thing, the most important thing. When someone shares their lunch with you and you give them your ancestral bedding in return, nobody loses. Everybody wins. Because that's what love does. It multiplies everything it touches. The galaxy learned that lesson. The universe embraced that truth. And it all started with 8 cubs who loved a human enough to break every rule, violate every tradition, and sacrifice every treasure, just so she wouldn't have to sleep on a cold metal floor. That's the power of love. That's the force of kindness. And that's the revolution that transformed scarcity into abundance across the known universe. It didn't require weapons or politics or grand philosophical arguments. It just required 8 young hearts that couldn't bear to see their friend uncomfortable, and 1 human heart that couldn't bear to eat alone. The revolution isn't over. It continues every time someone shares, every time someone cares, every time someone sees a need and fills it. Because the cubs discovered the ultimate truth: there's always enough when we share. The universe provides abundance to open hands and open hearts. Emma Walsh, maintenance technician, accidental revolutionary, mother to the galaxy, proved that with her life. The cubs, her precious troublemakers, proved it with their gift. And together, they proved that sometimes the most powerful force in existence is simply refusing to let someone you care about sleep on a cold, hard floor. That's the story of the Unity Nest. That's the legacy of the cubs. And that's the truth that echoes through eternity. When we share what we have, we discover we have enough for everyone. When we give from love, we receive beyond measure. When we refuse to let others suffer while we rest in comfort, we transform the universe itself. All because 8 cubs carried their bedding to Emma's room. All because they couldn't bear to see her sleep on metal one more night. All because love, real love, doesn't calculate or hesitate. It just gives everything and discovers, to its amazement, that everything given returns as infinite abundance.